Also, I am recording this, so feel free to turn your screen off if that makes you uncomfortable. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. It was on my list and I just read it. Okay. Roll taken. Awesome. Oh, you guys fit all your stickies on one screen. Good job, guys. Okay, I see people are nervous about using Canvas for the first time. I know PBS is using Canvas. It's easier than you think it's going to be. I'm just going to say that as a teacher who's used it. Is this our 4th year using it in BSD, you guys? I don't remember. Guest speakers, yeah, totally. This is a great year to have guest speakers in. Awesome. Too many preps, digital platforms to connect. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do for the rest of the day is I'm just going to kind of walk you through what we've done with the patterns curriculum and try to show you as many ways as I can in the next 50 minutes as to how we're kind of introducing collaboration online, because it's not an easy task. So back to our screen. Our agenda for the day. So for the first like 20 or so minutes, I'm just gonna kind of walk you through the new unit planner and walk you through each task set and really point out the differences. Some task sets stayed the same because they were mostly online anyway. So I'm gonna walk you through the big differences for what we've done for distance learning. You'll have time to engage with colleagues reflecting about assessment, what that looks like, collaboration, what that looks like online and how we can do that, and then some time for questions and answers at the end. So just because we are short on time, if you have a question, please put it in that Padlet that you are all in right, or not Padlet, the Jamboard that you are all in right now, in the very last slide, slide 6 in our parking lot, or if you have a burning question that can't wait, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll try to do my best to manage questions there. I can't see the chat when I'm full screen, but I'll try my best, okay? If you have a super burning question, just put yourself off of mute and you can ask me as I go. All right, Zoom norms. Remain muted when you are not speaking, just for background noises and things like that so people can focus. Like I said, questions can be posted in the parking lot section of Jamboard. And if you have an immediate question, use the Zoom chat feature, or you can take yourself off of mute if I'm really not answering it and bug me. All right, distance learning version 1. So if you are in the slideshow, you can click on this second link right here. I will also put it in the chat. Apparently I have to stop sharing to put it in the chat. It's never happened to me before, but okay. That's how we're gonna do it now. Okay, so if you've taught patterns bio, you have seen this before. This is how we set up our units. So basically what I'm going to do in the slideshow is just walk you through each task set. So the links are put in the slideshow and the links are also here. So right now you can really decide, do you want to walk through this with me in the unit outline, or do you just want to walk through this with me in the slideshow? So you have the option to do either one. It's up to you. Okay, but our phenomenon stayed the same. Our essential questions stayed the same for unit 1. We just added some distance learning things, and there's one brand new task set that I'm going to walk you through today too. Okay, so we're going to start with day 1. We're going to skip that because we're already behind. Okay. Okay, so our unit essential question is, how does the increase of size of human populations impact biodiversity, and how can we reduce those impacts? That's the same as it always was, with just a few tweaks here and there. So day 1, map investigation. This looks a little bit different. So if you guys want to click in the map investigation so that we can look at that together. The idea and the concepts are the same. They're still looking at maps. They're still looking at graphs and looking through data. The difference is they're not counting up all of those squares anymore. We did that for them. And they're really just making qualitative observations about how the land has changed over time. So this is the slideshow that you will give as a teacher, right? Or edit however fits for your classroom. Okay, they're still looking through Google Earth, that time-lapse function, making observations. Here's Beaverton. I did that because that's where I teach, right? So this is a random 3 order. So they kind of have to make an educated guess about what order this is in. They say it's either, they know they're from 1984, 2000, and 2016. Okay, but they have to make an educated guess as to which one is which. So here's 84, 2000, and 2016. That one's kind of the easiest to tell because it's the clearest, but that's okay. All right, so this is the same setup as before. Each square is 1 kilometer, 1 square kilometer, but I'm just going to quickly walk you through how the data collection is different. So on slide 9, go ahead and click on the template. It's in bright yellow because you're going to have to make a new template for each period. Oh, it went down. That's why I couldn't click on it. And I know this is going to be like fire hose information to try to get all of this at you. So let me know if I'm going too fast. I just want to make sure I point out all the things that are different that we've changed. So as you can see, the data is already put in. So that's different. If you can click, my screen is too big right now, but if you click on the example, you can see what we're asking students to do. Here we go. So in Beaverton, right, here's the link to the images that they're going to look at. So each group will get their own set of data. There's Hillsborough, Happy Valley, Forest Park, Redmond, and Clackamas. So you'll kind of group students in those groups, and they'll click on their own tab, look at the images that are here. So instead of printing these out and having them color on them and count, they're really just looking at them and making qualitative observations. So all of the images are gridded. All of them should be organized in their own folder so that they don't have to wade through anything. Okay, and they're looking at those same images that they would have when you printed them out, just online. And they can say, oh, in 1984, there are lots of green spaces. You can see all the farms are blocked. right? Then now there are fewer green spaces closer to the city. Out in the farms, there's still lots of natural spaces in 2000. And then here, now in 2016, there's much less green space and farms are starting to get pushed out of the city. So that's what we would expect students to do, not to count up tallies, but just to make qualitative observations. And then look at the graph. Okay, so notice some things about the graph, right? Our slope is how fast things are changing. Know that the y-intercept really doesn't mean anything in this case, not anything of importance at least, because just of the way that it's set up. Okay, so here on slide 11, there's a slide walking them through what all of those things mean. So if you can see my screen in the purple, it says, click this link to view the gridded images of each location, and then use the graphs to make observations about trends in the data and look at the different tabs to view what's happening around Oregon. So I tried to make it as clear as possible as to what was where on that screen. And then what students do, right, is they just think about how things have changed, right? So one similarity and difference, or an obvious difference between blank and blank is, okay, thinking about the change in time, over time, I mean, and then how they're gonna like orient themselves to all of this is they're still making our driving question board, and they're making their driving question board on Jamboard, what you guys just did. Okay, so keeping biodiversity and ecosystem health in mind, use the Jamboard link given to you by your teacher to write 3 group questions about biodiversity and urban growth in Oregon. Okay, so we made a note here that if you're doing this task asynchronously, each individual can write 1 question instead of writing them in the group. Okay, but the link to the Jamboard, we have a template of it in the unit planner. So you'll see it looks a lot like the one that we gave you today. Right, I might add these to text boxes. That was a new feature that I just found like 3 days ago. So I'll probably edit these into text boxes instead of sticky notes. Right, but as you post similar questions, group similar questions in the same area. So what they're going to do is, you know how they have all those stickies and then we communicate and we say, oh, this is the same general grouping. This is the same general grouping of questions. They're just doing that virtually. So as they think of a question, they're going to put it on their Jamboard and then read through other people's questions and move their stickies as they go. Or you could do that as a whole class synchronously. You could have them put all of their questions on the Jamboard and then have a discussion together and say, okay, where should we move these around to synchronously in class? So that's kind of your choice as how you want to do that, but they're still creating that driving question board. It's just on Jamboard now instead of on a piece of paper. Okay, any questions about task set 1? Okay, roughly the same, a little bit different.
Quick question.
Go for it.
I was curious how you use your interactive notebook. Like, would you have students start with the digital INB and then go to the PowerPoint, or do you always start with the PowerPoint and then reference them back? Because I was noticing in task set 1, there's questions about the Jamboard and a link to put the Jamboard in.
Yeah, so I always start with my INB for the day. So that's how I introduce the essential question for that day. And then that's kind of how I go about and say, here's our agenda. And then they click on links through there. So the INBs that we put out, right, are blank slate. You can add links in there for students to just be able to click on and have that be their home base. Or you can just have that be their note-taking ability. It's really however you want them to use it, especially in distance learning. I just feel like if they can go to one place for all of their stuff, right, that's probably the best. So I have my students go, it's either in Canvas or it's in your interactive notebook. Like those are the two places that you're always going to be looking for any links, any assignments, any updates, things like that.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, on to task set 2. This task set really is the same. It basically is that slideshow and notes and some readings. So what I might do in this case is give them their readings asynchronously. They don't need to do that while on a Zoom call, on a Zoom meeting. So they can do their reading on climate change in Oregon's forests and take notes on their own time. I will probably make a screencast of myself going through the notes of that levels of biological organization at the end, right? Because we walk them through like biome, all of that kind of stuff. So I'll probably make a screencast of myself doing that. Because the feedback that we've gotten and then I've heard from students is that they feel like it's a waste of time if you're just sitting there and going through a slideshow that they could have done by themselves. So what I would do is I would give myself, put out a screencast of myself going through that and then have a synchronous session where they can share their notes. They can ask any questions. We can have discussions. I can ask questions, maybe little quizzes, polls on Zoom, things like that, about really checking for understanding in that synchronous session instead of just delivering information that they can really read on their own time. So that task set didn't change. We really just need to be creative in how we're presenting that information. Okay, how do populations grow? So this is our populations lab, distance learning style. So the slides are pretty much the same. The student template looks almost the same. The point of the lab is the same, right? To look at how different countries are growing at different rates. But I do want to walk you through this data discussion template. I have an example that's filled in too, but I'm going to show you. The blank one first. So we really had to put our heads together to think about how we were going to have data discussions virtually and how they were going to see each other's data and ask questions about it. And this is what we came up with. So as you can see, they have their group number, right? So this might be USA or India or China, or Mexico or whatever country that they have. And then they put their group members' names in. Okay, and then we have a note here that says, as you contribute your answers to this document, type in your individually assigned color text. So if I was group member 1, I would always type in red so that me as a teacher, I know who has contributed to that conversation. Okay, some questions have multiple possible answers. So for these, every group member is expected to participate. Some don't have multiple answers. It's just exponential. That's the answer, right? So I wouldn't expect every 4 students to write exponential in the chat, right? It's really just for those long thought questions. So how this is laid out is we just kind of chunked out the data discussion into different parts. So first their graphs, right? They would put their country here and then they would paste their Desmos graph in. Okay, and so now we can see all of the graphs together and now we can have some of these discussions about what's happening. So my response to what are some similarities in these graphs might be they're all increasing, or they're all increasing. That's the biggest one, right? What are some differences in these graphs? So then they just go through all of the questions, and we can have discussions about these synchronously. They could fill these out asynchronously, and then you could have discussions about them. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it after they've made their Desmos graph. So my first day of this lab will probably be introducing them to the data and having them fill out Desmos. And then I might send them home asynchronously to think about at least some of these questions. Maybe I'll have them do the first 4 or 5 asynchronously. And then we'll come back, have a discussion. They'll get back into their breakout groups, and we'll really have a richer discussion about the math together, right? Some of those trickier concepts we'll have a discussion about together in a synchronous way, instead of expecting them to figure out exponential equations by themselves, right? They're really just making observations about the patterns, and then we'll come back together and go through it. So this is one that we did in our PD last week, so that you can just kind of see what it looks like when it's filled out. Okay, so here are their graphs that they made. So you can see, okay, here's USA, here's Mexico, here's Bolivia, right, and Somalia. So they can see that they're changing at different rates, right, but they're all doing this really steep increase. So now, here they've typed in different colors, and we've had a semi-virtual conversation about the data. So that's the biggest difference in populations. The lab is still the same. It's just how we discuss that data is different. We also have one of these for enzymes. It looks a little bit different because the enzyme lab is different, but it's the same general idea. Any questions about populations?
Hey, Jesse.
Yes.
Meg. Meg Griffith. I'm from Cleveland High School. I'm wondering, so is there just this one sheet for the whole class then?
So I'll give this sheet to each of my different periods, yeah.
Okay, so everybody's working on the same document?
Yes.
In this one. Okay. That is my question. Thank you.
Yes, you are welcome.
I have a question. It's Erin from Franklin.
Hello.
Hi. So maybe I missed this it's a lot to kind of toggle back and forth, but
I know, and I'm like giving it to you real fast. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought it would just be easier to just ask out loud. Are students actually doing like a breakout chat away from the class, or do you mean they're just discussing this through the not on paper,
through this
but
document?
like through the document?
I will probably have them do a mix of both. So synchronously in class, I will probably have them in breakout rooms and making their graphs together, their population graphs on Desmos. And then asynchronously, I will probably say, okay, Zoom meeting over by tomorrow or our next meeting date. Answer the first 4 questions. What are some similarities? What are some differences? All the easy ones that are just observations about the data. And then we will come back, share kind of what we've seen everybody write, and then dive into the math in the kind of tricky exponential part together. And so I'll lead them through that conversation and have different breakout groups, or they'll go back into their group, small group, discuss, and then we'll come back and discuss what that p-value means, or is the growth realistic, and those kind of trickier questions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's more, I have more of a technical thing. Like I've never done the breakout chat groups, but I'll figure it out. I just wondered if that's what you meant, that they were actually like in groups separately meeting and talking and stuff. That makes sense.
So Erin, with Google Meets, which is what we're supposed to use, you have to open separate meets for each breakout group, and then guide the students to different links. And if your internet is slow, it doesn't work very well.
Okay, thanks for the info.
Speaking of great breakout groups, we're going to do our first one just because Erin is totally right. Thinking about how to get students to collaborate online is something different. So I want to just give us a few minutes to talk to each other about it. So we're going to do just a quick dyad. So your question is, in what ways will you encourage collaboration during distance learning? How does this impact your practice as a facilitator? Okay, so we can think about science as a collaborative process, group accountability. How do you make sure that one person isn't domineering the whole conversation? Class accountability, and also building leadership skills. All those things that collaboration is good for. Okay, so you're going to pick one to focus on, or maybe you just talk about a bunch. But partner A, let's see, partner A is going to be the person with the longest hair today. Okay, so partner A is going to speak for 1 minute. Partner B, you're just listening intently, really focusing on what the other person is saying. And then I will send out a message for when to switch. So look out on the top of your screen, and you should see when to switch partners A and B, and then I'll bring you back, okay? I'm just going to put you in random breakout groups this time. How many people do we have in here?
20.
Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Oh no, I accidentally left. Can I go back to room 7?
Oh no.
Oh boy.
She's back too, so.
Oh, sorry. There we go. That was my bad. We're just talking about how we've never used breakout rooms before, and then I clicked the wrong button, and
so there you go.
But anyway, I was just saying that I'm concerned about how students not verbally engaging is going to be a challenge to overcome, and I'm hoping to do some stuff with like maybe the chat and like thumbs up, thumbs down, and some sort of like tech tools that get students to collaborate and talk. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Oops, I think you're muted.
even at the end of last year when I knew my students well and I had a bunch of kids chatting in the classroom, they wouldn't talk online.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting that we think of them as online creatures, but really their online creatureness is texting each other or sending messages to each other, not communicating face to face. So really thinking about that as you do these things, maybe they don't want to talk in a group, and they would rather just talk to each other on that shared document. Or how do we keep them accountable? How do we say, okay, one person is going to have to come back and share out, just to make them be like, okay, we have to talk to each other, right? That same kind of thing that we do in the classroom. Keeping that in mind, that we think that they're very tech literate, but their tech literacy is much different than how we think of being tech literate. So just keeping that in mind as we go through. Anybody have like an aha moment that they really want to share before we move on to the other? There's only 2 task sets left, so. Okay, moving on. All right, our next task set, so after populations, we move into wolves of Yellowstone. This is the same, no changes. It's just really thinking about what you want to do synchronously versus asynchronously. This might be a good one to break up into groups to read graphs and do that kind of stuff. But I'm sure a lot of this they could probably do on their own, and then you could come back and discuss the key points if you wanted to also. So I'm going to skip that one because it's the same, and I'm sure you guys have done wolves in Yellowstone before. This is the brand new task set. So we gave them the option between the biodiversity and the conservation project. So not everyone is going to do conservation, and thinking about like the impact of the human impact on populations and on the environment. So we decided to put this task set in. And thought that it was a really good moment to talk about environmental justice and the environmental justice movement and what that means. So here is the brand new task set that I'm going to walk you through really fast. Okay, so some of this is the same. Some of this is just the first part of the biodiversity or the conservation project that I stole, right? So thinking, okay, how are human populations growing? How are extinction rates growing? Okay, where do people live? What about population and human population density and animal biodiversity? Just getting them to look at images and graphs. Right, back to our maps of Portland. And then they go through and they think of biodiversity and human impact, both locally. We have local examples here in Portland, and we have global examples. So thinking that our global issues can also be local, and our local issues can also be global, getting them to think in both ways, macro and micro. So there's a video here about the problem with palm oil. This is really like broad scale what's happening with palm oil. And then this video down here, Indonesia's palm oil industry, really talks about how it's impacting indigenous cultures and indigenous peoples who are living in those forests. Then they have some thinking questions about biodiversity. Here's another example of saving rainforests. This is in Brazil, not in Indonesia, but this example is kind of cool. These local tribes are starting to work with technology and drones to kind of catch people who are chopping down the Amazon rainforest illegally. So like how they're using technology to really conserve their land and where they live. And then here's an example locally, right? So this is a little frog that can't get to where it needs to go to mate because there's a big highway that's in their way. So this is about a local organization who helps the frogs pass. So they're watching these and then they're reflecting in the INB also as they go through these and thinking about questions and as all of that as you go. More thinking questions. Okay, here's our habitat corridor. This is when we really, this video gets to the whole idea of the habitat corridor project. And then what can you do to help maintain biodiversity, right? I don't like sending them with just doom and gloom, like everything is bad. So getting them to take some power back, putting them in the room and having them think about their conversation, even if it's just a little thing, or maybe now they just learned something about biodiversity in their local area. So getting them to think about that. If you have other links, please send them my way. That we can add in here. And then now we're getting into environmental justice and thinking about how the impacts of habitat loss and really environmental damage is not equal across our society, and that there are communities that are highly impacted by environmental damage and communities who are less impacted by environmental damage. So getting them to think about some of those inequities and how they're built into science and built into some of that environmentalism. So this is Robert Bullard. He is a pioneer in the environmental justice movement. He's written some really awesome articles. So this is just kind of a background on him. And then they go through, and in their interactive notebook, there's a piece that lets them explore environmental justice. It's just such a broad thing, and there's so much about it that I wanted them to kind of pick something that they wanted. So there's an article here about the whole environmental justice movement, if they just want to say, what the heck is this? There's youth environmental justice in Portland. Maybe they want to get more locally involved about how they're going to be an ally in Portland. Here is just a little fact sheet that they can find things out on, and then a cool article from Science Magazine that kind of walks through, has really good images about the consequences of systemic racism on urban environments and how they're highly impacted by environmental ways. Does that make sense? So basically what they're doing in this task set, this is like our learning task set, right? So this is more like in task set 2, where they're taking notes about climate change and taking notes about how all of those things were different in our biomes and our levels of organization. This is kind of the same. What is conservation? How is that happening? Because then after this task set, they are going to have a choice between either the Habitat Corridor Project or the Biodiversity Inquiry. So they're not doing both. They get to choose one or the other and use all of that information from the whole unit to help answer these questions. So the Biodiversity Project is much different. The Habitat Corridor Project is roughly the same because it was research-based anyway. So it just walks them through some more of that research. I think, don't quote me on this, I'm actually gonna make a note to myself. I got some good student examples. I'm pretty sure I put those in the folder, but I'm just gonna double check. Made a note to myself to do that. Okay, so Habitat Corridor, they're thinking about ways that they can engineer solutions to either increase maybe in like environmental conservation in urban areas that they just learned about through the environmental justice movement, or they're picking a specific animal, a specific species, and specific places where they want them to be able to go. Okay, and then the biodiversity inquiry is a little bit different. I'm going to walk you through some of the changes that I made. The general concept is the same. I just shortened it and made my expectations lower for things that they were doing. So instead of having them go through and name the name of the species, maybe they just say black spindly thing number 1, right? Like, I'm not expecting them to go through and use a guide to know exactly what species that they're looking at as they look through it. Okay, so they're doing procedure. The procedure, I went outside in my backyard and made videos of it. So those videos of the new procedure are in the slideshow that's connected to this. But basically they're not sifting anything. They're just taking leaf litter, putting it into a bag, and then sifting through all of that leaf litter. There's still bugs in there, right? It's just gonna be more leaves than bugs. So make sure to tell them, like, the critters like to hide in the bottom. So as they're sampling and taking out parts of their leaf litter, if they're only taking from the top, they're probably only going to get leaves. So make sure that they're kind of digging around in there as they sample to get out some of those critters that are probably hiding in the bottom of their pillowcase. So I took out, trying to find where it is. Here it is. Raw data collection is going to be in a separate thing that they can share with each other. So this is going to be your decision. If you want to have them meet socially distanced at a park, allow them to do that. I'll probably give my students that option, like, hey, if you want to wear masks and go meet at your local park and do this just in pairs where you're socially distanced, great, go do it together. If you want to do it in your backyard or by yourself, great, do that also. But if they do it together, they can then share this raw data collection template instead of sharing each other's templates with each other. Okay, so that's all basically the same. They're not, and we're not asking them to do Simpson's Biodiversity Index anymore, and we're not asking them to write a full lab report. It's just a CER at the end. So yeah, just tried to shorten it as much as I possibly could and make it as user-friendly as possible. Okay, so that's the unit. That's unit 1, distance learning. Does anybody have any questions? I know I just spoke very quickly. An hour is not a lot of time.
Hi, so I had a question regarding the pacing. If we are going, and I don't know if everybody's doing the same thing. So we'll have 4 days a week, an hour each with kids in our district. And what are you guys seeing for this unit, how long it will take?
So these units are written based on 90-minute blocks, but I don't think anyone has a 90-minute block anymore. So what I'm saying, what kind of works for me in the spring is a normal 90-minute class period. I spread out over like 3 days. Yeah.
So at that pacing, that would pretty much take us the whole first quarter to get through unit 1. Because it looks like there's like 15 days, I think, that are scheduled for this, for unit 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if it takes us 3 times as long to get through the material, that would put us at all of the first quarter, right?
15 days. Yeah, pretty close. Thinking, so not in the spring, I didn't really have them do much in terms of asynchronous. So I don't know how that's going to play into, because I'm going to ask them to do a lot more not together this time.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I was kind of worried about the pacing too, just because I know since, you know, a quarter is, you know, a whole semester. If I have to spend the whole quarter getting through unit 1, I still have 2 others to be halfway done for the year. So I feel like I've got to get through 3 units the first quarter. And so that's my concern a little bit, is just the pacing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that we need to just know that we're not going to get through everything. And I have 0 expectations that I'm going to get through 3 units in 1 quarter. That just will not be possible. So my hope is to get through 2 units, right? I might still have to shorten things through this unit, and you guys know your students, and you know your classrooms, and you know your teaching style. So take what you want from these units. We've tried to just put everything that we did distance learning wise. And so if there is a activity that you really liked and you're like, yes, I want to keep that, keep it. If there's an activity you didn't like, maybe you edit it, or maybe you just skip it, right? Like, this is your classroom. And we are just trying to provide as much support to get through all of those NGSS targets as we can. But being honest with ourselves, it probably is not going to happen that we get through all of the targets this year, and that's okay.
I also was just looking at my calendar from last year, and the biodiversity lab took a lot of time. So I only had 2 weeks left in the first quarter when I finished this last year anyway. So it's not that far off.
Yeah.
So I think the concern is that many people are doing a 4x4, so that's really a whole semester. But I think, like you said, Jesse, like, one thing to look at is what learning targets, like, go back to the learning targets that are addressed and see, like, oh, that learning target's actually assessed 2 or 3 times, which is awesome, but we don't have time for that now. So what are we going to shorten and take out of this? This is like the buffet right here, and you're going to have to, like, pick and choose and pace it how it works for you.
If you guys scroll, if you're in the unit planner, I don't have the unit planner open, but I do have this open and I'm going to show you. But if you scroll to the very bottom, there's an kind of an assessment guide that shows you which assessments or which activities assess which learning target, right? And there's multiple for each, which, yes, is awesome in a normal classroom, right? And yes, we do still need to give students multiple and varied opportunities to show their knowledge that are not just tests, especially in distance learning. So go through this at the very bottom and really kind of see, okay, which activities out of all of these do I want to focus on to get at those learning targets? Thanks, Meg, for pointing that out. Any other questions?
I have a quick comment. So I was, I did the project-based learning training last week, I think it was, and thought that the corridor engineering could fit a good project-based learning scenario. So I'm gonna be making a little bit of additional, like, launch supports for that early in the unit, and I'll try to share those out if people are interested.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
I'm just curious how much other folks are planning on doing, like, kind of more traditional assessments. Because I know in looking in the suggested summative assessments, you've got like the mini tests and things like that. And I'm wondering what format people are going to try that, and if we're concerned about, like, testing security and, like, sharing, because I know a lot of the patterns assessments are, you know, teacher protected and stuff.
So my 2 cents on that. is that I will probably only give tests and not even full tests, just like a question from a test, one of those long answer ones. If a student hasn't already shown me proficiency in that target through projects and conversations and even their interactive notebook, like if that is full and really rich, right, that to me is evidence of their learning also. So just looking at all kinds of ways through projects and creative means to really get to know if they know what they should know. Anybody else want to put in their 2 cents?
Yeah, I would just suggest changing the question if you're worried about, yes, there are answers to all of those questions out in the world, or there will be very, very soon. Change it up, like change the numbers just a little bit, and then you'll see who copied it, because it will be wrong.
Okay, it is 10 o'clock, and I want to honor your time. If you have any questions, I can stay on for a few more minutes so that we can talk. If you have any questions, you know, Charlotte and Caitlin and I are always available for email. But yeah, look out for, oh, and paper packet is going to be posted on the Unit 1 by the end of this week. So look out for that too if you have students who don't have tech access. We have a paper packet that you can print for them. I think that's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Jess, I